Did you know that simplifying complex concepts can drastically improve a brand's effectiveness, leading to a higher customer engagement and way better results? Welcome to another enlightening episode of Spark and Ignite Your Marketing. I'm your host, Beverly Cornell, and today we have the pleasure of introducing Chirag Niger, a dynamic speaker, advisor, and expert in marketing simplification. Through his platform, Chirag Speaks, and his role at Google, Chirag has helped hundreds of businesses worldwide move from chaos to action with his proprietary methods and marketing strategies. I love marketing stuff. Chirag, I'm so excited to have you here.
I'm excited to be here. I'm very excited.
Anytime I get to speak with other marketing, can I call you a nerd?
No, please.
Marketing nerds.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. Beverly, and my friend, and the thing is, you rarely find friends who are into it, right? It's like everyone loves the occasional story, but it's always when it gets to the, okay, Chirag, you need to stop. Right? These stories are like, for example, every time we go to a restaurant, like I love a fancy restaurant here in New York City, I always point out how there's no currency symbols on the menu, right? Because studies have shown when you see currency symbols, right? You see them as actual prices as opposed to just numbers. Or like the second or third wine on the menu is going to be, the first one's going to be the most expensive, and the second or third is going to be the one they really want to drive you to, right? Because the first one sets the tone. So you choose the second or third. Like these little tiny stories, I nerd out, I geek out about them. And I'm sure my friends are just sick and tired of me at this point. So Beverly, when I get a chance to talk to a fellow marketer who also nerds out about this stuff, I'm super excited.
Okay, so talk a little bit about, you have such an interesting story where your family is from, the entrepreneurial background, from your family side to like where you are today. Talk a little bit about how you came to be with Chirag Speaks versus a 9-to-5. Like you have all these different complexities to your story. So talk about your journey.
No, appreciate it. So I think the biggest thing is my family came from Punjab, India, right? My parents, they're first generation immigrants here in the US. And while I was born and raised here in the US, they had clothing stores. And I literally grew up at the clothing store. My crib was there. My first toy was my dad's credit card machine, right? And as beautiful and as amazing as that entire experience is, I got to learn public speaking, how to do sales and all that kind of stuff. You also were very aware from a young age that there was something called the rent payment, right? And I remember we used to be across the street from a Modell's, a McDonald's, like all these like big, like at the time there were these big brands and they always had a line in front of them. But for some reason, our little clothing store I had never really seen a line necessarily, right? And I just remember constantly thinking that until one day when my dad goes, he put out at the time, leather jackets were the big craze in New York City and Manhattan, right? And my father put out a rack of leather jackets and he marked it for $99 instead of $100. I'm in my mind, right? I'm a kid. I'm like, I didn't understand what was going on. Obviously at the time, now I know like certain psychology, right? This is a loss leader. The 99 seems a lot less money than maybe $100 might, and all the sort of psychology that goes behind it. But for the first time, I actually saw a rush. Right. And then that got me really fascinated into what is this marketing and branding thing? Suddenly there's a way for me to control my destiny if I can figure out the right words to share with people or the right message to get along. But then since then, I've had the fortune of essentially going off during my college years, I got to learn a bunch of stuff in the academy. So much research and content out there, books that people never borrowed from the library that like I was sitting there with just 20 books around me of the best business books I could have ever imagined in my life. Yeah, Beverly, I'm sitting there. I'm just like, I'm salivating practically. I'm like, this is great. This is what I've always wanted. But I realized the information's useless if I'm not sharing it. So I started sharing this content. We started doing local workshops for small businesses and all. Eventually, we started putting the content online. We've grown to an audience of about 60,000 followers across social media. And that in of itself has turned into my own sort of, like we were mentioning, the methods and all. It's got this called the brand clarity framework. And then from there, that's turned into its own sort of speaking career. And I've been very fortunate where I say in addition to my 9-to-5, so I'm at the moment, currently over at Google. My job, I'm a customer success lead, which is half proactive problem solving, half crisis management. But I get the pleasure of working with some of the world's largest advertisers in the world, right? Sort of going through their Google Ads ecosystem support experience. And then on the side, like my 5 to 9 is I get to travel the nation giving talks about marketing and branding to businesses that quite frankly resemble the business my family had when we were growing up. For me, I always tell people I want to be that sort of, this finally makes sense to me and it would have helped us back then. I'm hoping it'll help people now. And then along the way, one of the cool, fun things we were talking about earlier is the History Channel has a mini docuseries called The Mega Brands That Built America. a really good series that talks about some of the biggest brands in American history. And in season 2, I've had the opportunity and the pleasure to come on as a commentator throughout the season, which has been in of itself just an absolute blessing and amazing.
Well,
I think that covers everything I've done so far.
Yeah. And I think it's pretty cool that you have rubbed elbows with Gary Vee, because I just am such a fangirl. So you said that you really wanted to help other businesses like your mom and dad's clothing store, right? The fashion store. Talk about how this concept of simplify marketing for others, because it's something that's really near and dear to our heart. It's all about clarity. A lot of entrepreneurs do what they love, but they don't understand how to communicate that to their customer in a way that is super clear. And so many small businesses have limited resources and they can't just pray and hope for the best and all of that. Like, you need to be really strategic about how you use the resources you have.
Absolutely.
And if you're not clear and focused, it's essentially putting money down the drain. So talk a little bit about that, because that is, you are speaking my language when you talk about clarity and simplification. So talk a little bit about that process.
And I know, Beverly, from what I'm hearing, that's a big pillar of your brand as well, right? Helping your clients figure out how to build clarity into their frameworks or into their processes. Mm-hmm. And I think at the end of the day, the thing I always tell people is, Beverly, how long have you been doing this Spark and Ignite podcast?
This podcast only since January, but I've been podcasting since 2007.
Yeah. But even let's just take this, what is it, 6 months now? You said since January, right? I always tell people your work, what you've done in 6 months, your baby, the amount of countless hours you've put into this, if you are lucky, will one day get summarized in maybe 3 or 4 sentences. I have a conversation with a buddy of mine, right? Someone goes, oh, I saw you were on that podcast, right? With Beverly, what was that like? I'll say, oh yeah, the Beverly does XYZ thing. Beverly has this podcast. This is how the podcast went. Oh, if you want to check it out, here's a link, right? 4 sentences. Everything you've ever done reduced down to maybe 4 sentences. And that's the reality for every single brand that's out there. You are, but maybe a minute and 30 seconds of a thought for any one of your customers on a given day, because they have millions of things going on, right? And unfortunately, what we tend to do in marketing and branding is we allow the audience to decide what words are. You are relying on me having a good mood, remembering you properly, thinking of the things you've said. Reality, that's not. Most people are stressed out. They've got a million things going on. And so my big philosophy when it comes to the clarity is I want you to be very clear about the words that you want people to use. Because your brand is essentially what people are saying, right, about you. I want you to be very intentional about the words you want. I won't get too much into detail. Happy to chat, but we call it these brand echoes, right? Can you be very clear for yourself and your team on what those words are, and then just find fun ways to remind people over and over. So eventually when someone asks me, hey, how was Spark and Ignite? How was Beverly? I'm simply echoing back the words you've given. So when you're questioning me, what do we mean by clarity? What I mean is literally doing the work of going, these are the things we want to be known for. These 4 things maybe that we want to be known for. And now I'm just going to find fun ways to remind people. Which for a brand is a lot easier than thinking of 18 different content pillars or millions of different strategies. I've just got 4 words. My website should have those 4 words. Yes. My content should have those 4 words. My Instagram bio should have those 4 words. Yes. It just, when I'm of these pamphlets or when I'm out and speaking about the product, it should include these 4 words. It becomes a lot easier for you to manage your market. Pausing there, Beverly.
But there's even this concept of the power of 3, right? Like we say 3.
Exactly.
So when you have 3 choices of what you're supposed to do versus 12 choices of what you're supposed to do, you can almost overwhelm someone with indecision by giving them too many choices. What brought you to that? What brought you to Chirag Speaks in the sense of the simplification and having your own? Is it just the education? Was it working with the hundreds of companies? How did you get there? What was was there a moment? Was there a spark that created that?
Beverly, I'm a middle child. I crave the attention. That is, people tend to ask, right? I think that's the sort of joke answer I give, right? Is one day I got on stage and realized, oh, wow, people are paying attention. If I start saying something, I better find something useful to say. But in reality, actually, what it came down to, my spark moment was seeing my father again. See, at the time when we started off early on, we were learning things like the typical marketing things that you learn in any basic or one-on-one class, right? The 4 P's of marketing, the ADA marketing funnel, things like that. And as I was learning these things, I reached out to my father. Indian immigrant, doesn't have an MBA or anything, been an entrepreneur his entire life, run dozens of different businesses in different industries. And in my mind, this is an individual who's going to look at what I'm saying, think it's too simplistic and move on. But I was like, as long as I can teach you it, then I know that I've learned it. To my surprise, he calls me back a few weeks later and goes, hey, I used that thing that you were talking about. And it actually helped me just take what was in my mind and put it on paper.
Yep.
And that's when it hit me, right? It was like, whoa, wait a second. If an individual that I thought would never entertain this would see me as literally his kid, right? Who he's taught all this stuff to. But if he's getting it, then maybe this can actually help people. So then that became my spark, right? We started posting. What really helped, I think, Beverly, when you're asking, getting down to the nitty gritty is putting the content online. Right. So we grew on TikTok at first. That was the first platform where we went viral. I think the first video that went viral it's done 1.7 million views. And in it, I think part of the clarity thing is I'm explaining the difference between consumer versus customer in using the example of Barbie. Right. But while I'm doing that, the video itself is of me speaking at an event. Right. So talking about intentionality and clarity it became very clear early on for me that if I wanted to be a speaker and that was my business and I wanted people to use the word, that's Chirag, that's a speaker, to then put out content of literally me speaking. And for me, it happened to be the one that helped me. So that went viral and did really well. From there, it's been, honestly, the beginning has been a lot of, it was early on was just going and reaching out to a bunch of colleges and saying, hey, look, like I have stuff I can talk about. Let me come in and speak at your entrepreneurship center. So I could build up a ton of content. Right. I was like, I'll do this for free in exchange. Allow me to film myself doing this. They were all okay with it. I would take the clips, start putting it on social media. And eventually it started growing into then conference hosts reaching out, businesses reaching out. And now fortunate enough where I've had a chance during the pandemic, I got to work with hundreds of businesses on one sessions. It's a great experience. And now it's a lot of conferences and in-house stuff. Pausing there.
So what do you think is the biggest thing that has changed since how have you transformed? What are the way you made decisions before versus the way you make decisions now? What's been the biggest evolution in that process?
Yeah. Being outcome driven as opposed to process driven. I think early on, I was an individual who constantly, if you told me, we say, okay, cool. Chirag, you need to start making videos of you speaking. Originally, I think early on, I focused very heavily on the process. Everything needed to be scalable. So right from the start, it was, okay, we're going to mount the lights this way so that I can turn them on in less than 2 minutes. We're going to have the camera constantly stationed here. What camera should we get? Let's research the camera for 20 minutes or for 2 hours, actually, more like it. The mic needs to be here. Okay, are we going to do this? Am I going to set up a studio here? Am I going to do this? Everything was step by step. Oh, it has to be some sort of process to it, some sense to it so that I can scale from day 1 to day 10. Day 1, I'll do 1. Day 10, I'll be able to do 10, right? And that approach, unfortunately, gets you really stuck in the details. And what you quickly find is it's almost like saying, okay, cool, we're going to go from New York to California, and you just start driving, right? And you're like, you end up getting stuck, right? At every turn, you're asking yourself, should I take a right or left here? You're going to be way off base. As opposed to just being outcome driven, right? Which was, okay, cool, I need to make a video. Let me just grab whatever camera's in front of me, grab whatever mic's in front of me. Let me just sit down and make a video, right? And I think that was the big, okay, cool, I want to go speak at XYZ college, right? First, there used to be this huge, okay, let me get a list of all these colleges, an email marketing list, we're going to reach out. And eventually it became, cool, I want to speak at that college. That's my outcome. Let me just go reach out to whoever the executive director is for their entrepreneurship center, send them my speaker packet. I think that has been the intentionality, being clear in where my outcome lies, what I really want, has been the big sort of change that has happened. Things don't have to be sustainable at first. They don't have to be scalable at first. Do it, get the outcome you're looking for, and then tweak. I always tell people it's not quantity versus quality, quantity for the sake of getting the quality, right?
Chirag, I love this because of so many reasons. I think as an only child who's a perfectionist, because all the things are on the one child, I oftentimes had gotten in my own way. Like, I can't do that because it has to be perfect. Like, it has to be perfect. And before I know it, like you said, like one step of it's taking me now 10 days versus just so I think we were talking a little bit before. I was wanted to do a podcast, and within 3 weeks, I made it happen. I decided that I will figure it out. Like, I'll do it and I'll figure it out. It may not be, I strive for excellence, not perfection, but this idea of what we think is perfect, what I think is really good is probably really good to other people.
Bang. Exactly. It's a typical fallacy, right? The more you know about what you do, right? The more everything seems, this is too simple. This is too. But for most people, most of your audience is going to be people who are trusting you to have done we always look at marketing 101 classes. Like, now I look back at marketing 101 classes and I'm like, this is too simple. This is too basic. But if I took a friend of mine and put them in the class, they'd sit there and be like, I'm learning so much. You become so aware. It's like You are allowed to be simple. You are allowed to start small.
Yes.
You are allowed to start unsustainably. Putting this initial pressure on yourself.
This episode is brought to you by BC and Associates Marketing's holiday special, 20% off our Brand Spark package. As 2024 comes to a close, it's time to set your business up for an incredible 2025. With our Brand Spark service, we'll help you ignite your brand by sharpening your message, refining your visuals, and giving you the tools to stand out in a crowded market. And for a limited time, you can save 20% when you use the code ALLIN20 at checkout. This offer is only available until October 31st, 2024. So don't wait. Start the new year with a brand that's clear, compelling, and ready for growth. Whether you're struggling with unclear messaging or visuals that just don't reflect your business anymore, our Brand Spark is designed to get your brand back on track. Visit bcandassociatesmarketing.com/brand spark to book your deep dive session today and use ALLIN20. ALLIN20 at checkout to save 20% before this offer ends. Let's ignite your brand and make 2025 your most successful year yet. And it's not going to allow you to create what you want to create. It's going to inhibit your true gift, I believe, at the end of the day, because you have a gift that's supposed to be for the world, whatever that is, whatever your industry is, whatever your thing, your passion is. And if you are so concerned about all those details, that gift cannot fully flourish. Love that concept of outcome versus process. Process is important. Having a system and all of that, super important. But looking at the outcome first of let's get it done, get it out there, and then we can
tweak.
Yeah.
It also becomes, I think, one of the most frustrating things you'll ever find, right? People who focus on the process will probably relate to this is you spent all this time setting up the process, get one outcome, and then you're sitting there going, oh, I actually didn't even care about this. Like, I don't like doing this. Like, you always have a good on you. I think there's some statistic where it's like 90 or 80% of podcasts don't get past episode like 10 or something. Some ridiculous statistic like that. And I think, so anytime a client reaches out and says, hey, I want to start a podcast, I'm like, okay, don't buy any of it. Go on Zoom and record yourself just having a podcast, right? Let's just do the simplest version of this, right? Or someone says, oh, I want to start a clothing brand. It's like, okay, let's first start off with Shopify, you print on demand, right? I do that for 2 weeks. See if you actually enjoy this or if you just enjoy the idea of this. Because then we can always build out the systems and the processes, everything. We can turn it sustainable over time. But first, just find the simplest version of what you're trying to do and just do it and see if you enjoy it. See if you actually want to keep doing that, if you like that as your identity. And then from there, we'll just find tweaks along the way to fix it.
I was talking to my assistant, Michelle, the other day.
Yeah.
And I feel like we have some really great foundational stuff. And I said, now it's like the magic tweaking that makes it amazing. And actually, that's the really fun part where you're like,
oh, yeah, because you get to obsess. Yeah. You get to go into it. No one really notices it except you, but you notice it to the point where you're like, it's almost like you get to tweak things to the point where, like they always say, right, the best process is the one that people don't even realize exists because it's just seamlessly working. The reason it's seamlessly working is because I got to really go into the new.
Yes. And that is the fun part, like when it's like magic. There's like little bits of magic in it. And she loves it too. She's like, oh yeah, that's amazing. Like that one little, but once you have the process in place and you have it working and you love it. I love this podcast, talking to people, hearing their stories, seeing it. I'm inspired and I learn something every single time. So I love this.
Yeah.
You have a favorite tool or theory called HUM?
The hum, yes, the hum or the echo.
Okay.
Yes. So we used to call it, it's gone through iterations of its own. To talk about getting something out there and then fixing it. But it's what I was talking about earlier, this idea of focusing on your echoes. At the time, we used to call it hum. I was trying to figure out a way to be able to explain this in a way where it said, you don't always remember the song, but you can hum the melody. So it's cool. If your people aren't going to remember every little part of your brand, what do you want them to hum? Think about the bare bones, the simplest, the hum, the tune is often the simplest part. It's so important. It's so intentional and it sets the tone, but it's the simplest part for people to grasp. Similarly, can you find the most simple words, the simple terms that you want people to grasp and hold on to so that when they are thinking about you, they're like, oh, there's that one podcast, Spark. Same way like how it hum, there's a song that goes, oh, Spark and Ignite. Okay, cool. I'll go for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm a big fan. You'll be surprised, Beverly. No, actually, you won't. Beverly, I know you do this really well with your clients. It's often not a lack of options. It's often an overabundance of them. People often think, okay, if I'm focusing on one thing, then I'm limiting myself, right? You're not. You're focusing, right? You're not limiting. You're focusing is the key word here. When you and I say simplicity and clarity, we're not saying dumb it down. We're not saying lose the magic, right? That's the biggest feedback we always get, right? It's, oh, but I feel like I'm not unique or creative. No, I just want you to be consistent. I want you to, when you go into a conversation and you're talking, people are asking you, what do? You're not sitting there word vomiting, right? I want you to be intentional about the 4 sentences you say.
I think this power of storytelling too, which I think you are also an advocate of, is super important. One thing that we say, we have the Spark, Ignite, and Blaze services, but we say, I sound like a firework, because I want people to immediately associate that with me in my wording. So I'm like a firework that helps spark your marketing and helps your business ignite to unbelievable growth or whatever. But I think people think when you think focus, they think small. No. And they don't think that you can still be a revolutionary brand and be focused.
Absolutely.
If you want to be a revolutionary brand, you need to be even more focused. And I think Steve Jobs was one of those people that was extremely focused. You look at the businesses that were really singularly focused, and that's what made them have way more impact in their reach and everything is based on that focus.
A good example to toss out there as well is Richard Branson.
Yeah.
Right?
Virgin Airlines. Yeah.
Yeah, Virgin Airlines and everything. You would imagine a man who has like dozens of brands under his umbrella. Somehow, despite all that, he still, if you see any news coverage on him, you always see the word adventurer or adventure thrown out. And I started noticing that weird trend coming on. So in my talks, I often talk about Richard Branson in the sense of like, despite he's doing hundreds of different things on any given day. He has this huge, massive brand, but still the word adventure consistently comes out. And you realize it's because his team is very intentional about it. So like even in a Virgin website where they have like a section talking about him, there's one paragraph where they use the word adventure almost 8 times in a paragraph or 2 paragraphs. And you're sitting there being like, oh, what if I like focus on one thing and I bore my audience? And it's like you have literally one of the largest over-expanding brands in the world, understanding this message of, look, we want to over-index on this word adventure. So we're literally going to over-index on it. I remember early on, I used to do anything and everything. So it was like, oh, I'll go interview a bunch of people. I'll do a bunch of podcast stuff. I'll go help XYZ people. And then I remember someone reaching out to me and going, this is someone I really wanted to work with for a while. Okay. Or almost manifestation in a way. She reaches out to her DM. She goes, I love your content. My problem is, Chirag, I've been scrolling on your Instagram for the last 5 minutes and I don't really know what you do. And this is about 2 years ago. I remember just sitting there. I was like, wow, right? Talk about not being able to take my own advice. And so since then, it's been a lot of literally shifting. I switched over to the handle chiragspeaks.com, literally putting speaks in the word itself. A lot of my content nowadays tends to be showing me speaking and stuff. Just again, reinforce that message over and over. It doesn't limit what I can do. I can still do a million trends, but I have to always make sure that I'm focusing on that idea of
Talk a little bit about the marketing you do. So you are on TikTok, you're on social media, you have this very large following of. Is social media like your favorite tactic? What's what? Cool. So what's your favorite one?
I think it comes back to knowing where your audience is. And I think I often tell people is act like an idiot and let the data tell you. So I remember when I first started posting content on TikTok, I really thought that my audience was going to be a lot of business owners reaching out, which now it is, right? Because I think we've been intentional over the last 6 to 8 months. But before that, the surprising thing was it was a lot of marketing students. Right. Yeah. So the comments on some of my most viral videos, to my surprise, weren't people going, oh, I'm going to use this in my business. Some small subset. Majority of them was, oh, my professor was trying to teach me this. I didn't get it. Or like people DMing me going, hey, I actually used that example you told us in the video in my exam when I was like giving as an example from a paper or something for marketing students. Now, and that's great. That's phenomenal. But I think I was creating content for business owners. It was reaching an audience of marketing students. And at that time, there was a pivot to be made, right? Should I be creating content that's a lot more marketing student centric? But then I also realized that if I'm a speaker and my audience, my core audience, it is great to have the 50, 60,000 followers on social media, but that audience isn't necessarily my converting audience. That audience allows me to test my stuff out. It becomes my credibility marker. It becomes this sort of community of people who are just like me, who are fascinated about marketing and branding. But if I'm a speaker, my customer, so those are my users, my customer, the people actually paying me will be the ones that are our conference hosts, for example. The directors at colleges will bring me in to speak, where for them, not a lot of them are on TikTok, where I found actually LinkedIn was a lot better for them, right? where I had a smaller subset, but I was able to reach out to people or like for them to see my content and be like, oh, wow, we want to hear more about your speaking. So the question, I think, when you say my favorite sort of social media, I think has been a great credibility marker, great way to test ideas out. But being intentional about where your audience is, for me, LinkedIn, and then word of mouth. For a lot of conference hosts, right? For them, there is a tight network. Right?
Mm-hmm.
They have a lot of pressure on them. They don't often have a lot of time to be able to vet the speakers. So if you come with like a referral, word of mouth, I think that's a big, powerful helper there.
Talk about, I don't want to use the word testimonial, but an experience of how you've helped transform a person's business or idea of marketing, or like a feel-good story, Chirag.
No. So we had someone who was working on this. She had this consumer packaged good company. It was a sporting goods. So she was a college student who had started a 6-figure business. And when it comes to the product design, to actually building this out, putting it out into the world, her marketing and branding, however, when it came to the tweaking, she struggled with because she was viewing everything as this big holistic chunk. Right. For example, she's looking at Instagram and TikTok. She goes, I have a smaller audience on Instagram, a bigger Instagram audience on TikTok. I'm going to focus on TikTok. Or we're not seeing a lot of sales come in, blah, 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 and all that. What I ended up walking with her was let's just map out the user journey. Someone sees your content, they go on your profile, they click onto your website, they go on the homepage, they go on the product page, check out, purchase confirmation, right? Let's map out these 7 or 8 steps and let's just look at the data. Right? When we started looking at the data, what we realized was that a large percentage of people were coming over from Instagram, but for some reason we kept losing them on the homepage. So we tweaked the homepage, right? We started fixing it. That's not really working for her. Eventually we're just like, let's just get rid of the homepage. You got rid of the homepage. And now what happens is all of a sudden people were going straight to the product page, sales skyrocket. What we realized was on Instagram, the type of content she was putting out there was showing the product in action. People were already convinced. They had already built affinity.
Yeah. And
they just wanted to go in and purchase. They didn't want to get distracted by the millions of other things that are on her home. And I think that for me also was an eye-opening moment of just how simple it can be. We overcomplicate it. We view it as this huge holistic chunk, break it down into little steps. And your job is essentially just to go step by step and see where people are getting stuck and then figure out why they are getting stuck. Either solve for it or get rid of that step out of their way. And I think for her, that was a really easy, she was able to take that philosophy to everything. She was building out the products, designing them to supply chain and all that. Look at things on the granular level, step by step.
Great advice and a great example of how like one thing that is like super obvious, but yet when she looked at the outcome, like there it is, like right there. Yeah, they use the user experience. She didn't need to convince anybody anymore. They were ready to buy. And if you put friction in that process, that's not going to help whatsoever.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, what is your long-term vision for what you're doing? What's the legacy going to be for you? Hello. You just wrapped up part 1 of this episode of Spark Ignite Your Marketing. I hope it fired up some new ideas for you. But guess what? We're not done yet. We've got even more sparks to ignite in part 2 dropping next Tuesday. You won't want to miss it. Trust me on that. So make sure you're subscribed to our newsletter because we'll shoot you a quick heads up as soon as the episode goes live. No FOMO here. Until then, keep that marketing flame burning. Wrapping up another episode of Spark and Ignite Marketing. For your weekly dose of inspiration, join our community on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, or TikTok for behind the scenes and exclusive content. Until next time, keep the spark alive and stay inspired.